Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. So we are on the first chapter, second section, and the 9th mantra. So you will let us chant it. Tanmay is not here; she is in TTC, so she can't make it. So we'll go ahead with chanting mantra by mantra. So the 9th mantra. Naisha tarkena matirapaneya.
Naisha tarkena matirapaneya.
Proktan yenaiva sugnyanaya preshtaha.
Proktan yenaiva sugnyanaya preshtaha.
Yam tvamapasatya dhritirvatasi.
Satyatirbatasi
Tvagdrangno bhuyan nachiketah prashtha. Okay, so I'll just mute your. Right. So you can look at the words Esha Matihi. So that Esha Matihi is, you have to break the words properly. From Naisha, Naisha becomes Na Esha, and Matirapaneya. So that we break it properly, and the sentence will be Na Esha Matihi Tarkena Apaneya, or Esha Matihi Na Tarkena Apaneya. So Esha Matihi, this knowledge, Na apaneya, cannot be grasped, cannot be obtained. Tarkena. Tarkam means logic, reasoning. Preshtha. So Preshtha is, oh dear one. Oh, one is dear to me. So Yamaraj is telling Nachiketas, oh dear one, this knowledge, this Atma Jnanam cannot be obtained by reasoning it out. Intellectual reasoning processes will not give you that. And Prokta Ananyena. So Ananya is a very important word here. Ananya means what? Where there is nobody else. So Anya means somebody else. Ananya means nobody else. Prokta means spoken by or taught by. So Prokta Ananyena. So Ananyena has to be understood as a person who knows that there is nobody else. Who is that person? He is a Jnani. So a Brahmanishta is. So Prokta Ananyena, spoken by these words taught by somebody who knows Brahman as himself. What happens? Sujanaya, you will understand. Tvam apaha, you have, and you, Tvam apaha, you have attained yam, tad jnanam, asibata. So this is a exclamation, asibata. You are indeed satyadritihi, a person who is firm in what he wants to do. Because Nachiketas has made it very clear that he firmly wants only knowledge, not any other thing. So asibata satyadritihi, O Nachiketaha, you are indeed a firm person. And naha bhuyat. So here that naha is very important. Remember that na in Sanskrit means no, and the na followed by a visarga becomes naha. Naha becomes vi. It's a very important distinction. So naha bhuyat means may I have or may we have tvadrak prashtaha, more seekers like you. Tvadrak like you, prashtaha. Dear ones, seekers, may I have more seekers, more students like you. So Yamraj is pleased with Nachiketas. He is saying that this knowledge or Nachiketas cannot be attained through reasoning, but taught by a competent teacher who has understood that there is nothing other than Brahman, that with that teaching, indeed, it is possible to attain this particular knowledge. And therefore, he says here, you have already attained that knowledge, Asibataha Nachiketaha. So, yam, that knowledge, he says you already attained. Why does he say that? Tvam apaha asibat. Tvam apaha yam. That knowledge you have already attained. Because now he knows that Yamraj knows that he is a competent teacher. And he knows that Nachiketas is adhikari, a competent student. And therefore, that knowledge is as good as attained for Nachiketas. So he said, Naha bhuyat, may we have Prishtatvadrakaha, more seekers like you. So Yamraj is very, very happy with Nachiketas. Then, so what he is saying here is that when you study the Shastram, two things are required. The Shastram is required, logic is also required. So, and when he says here, when he says Esha matihi na apaneya tarkena, it is to be understood by purely logic alone. It doesn't mean that logic is not required. As you have seen during the study of the Bhagavad Gita as well as the Upanishads, we do use logic a lot. But logic is used as a supporting discipline, not as the primary discipline. Primary discipline is what? Veda alone. And the logic we use to support the statement of the Veda. So if Shastram and logic are both required, the question is, why should I go to a teacher? Can I not study the Shastra using logic? So Yamaraj says here, no, you cannot do that. That's why Proktena Ananya. Only if it is taught by a proper teacher will it be understood. Why is this so? Because Shastra, the scripture, is meant for all sort of students, all levels of students. The beginners, the middling, the not so evolved, the highly evolved. The Shastram is meant for all of them. And therefore it has to be taught properly at each level. See, Shastram words are the same, but the interpretations have to vary depending upon what level the student is at. What you tell a beginner will be something. What you tell at a middling level will be a slightly more advanced, interpretation. It is not totally different from the beginning, but it is slightly more advanced interpretation. And what you tell the advanced student will be completely different from the beginning. And therefore, while the Shastric words, you will find the scriptural words, the mantras are the same, the teacher has to take into account the level of the student and accordingly temper his interpretation. That is what he's saying here. And that is why Veda prescribes different types of sadhana for different types of people. Thus, one sadhana can be prescribed for one type of student, but for another student, that sadhana may not be appropriate. So you will find that in the scripture, the same sadhana which is glorified at one point may be criticized at some other point. Right? Let us, for example, take what we have already done, the Upanishad which we have already completed, Mundaka. Right? In the first few stanzas, in the first few mantras of the Mundaka, karma is glorified. But a few mantras later, that same Mundaka says what? Those who take to karma are mudaha. They are foolish people. Take, for example, Smriti, Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna says somewhere, Swadharmam Nidhanam Shreyaha. It is better to die doing your own duties, saying that never renounce your duties. And in the 18th chapter, he says, Sarvadharman Paritijya, renounce all duty. Therefore, an appropriate meaning has to be extracted. And that is why a guru, a teacher is needed. And then that is why Yamraj says over here, Esha matihi na apaneya. This Atma Jnanam cannot be obtained by studying the scriptures independently, even if you are using logic. This can be gained only when it is communicated, when the scriptures are taught to you by someone who knows how to interpret those scriptures in the correct manner, keeping in mind the level of the student. Is a beginner, Is he a Madhyama Adhikari? Is he Uttama Adhikari? All this has to be kept in mind by the teacher when he interprets. And the teacher uses three tools: Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. Shruti is, of course, Veda Pramanam. Yukti is logic, Tarka, Anubhava, experience. When we saw long ago also in very many of our classes that whatever Shruti says, whatever the Veda says, has to be interpreted in keeping with logic and experience. Shruti cannot contradict logic. Shruti cannot contradict experience. All three have to be in sync. And therefore, scriptures, our own reasoning, and our own experience have to be taken into account. And this is what is meant by the word Ananya. Anya, the person who understands how to teach. Here, Prashtha means dear one, or Shishya. Twadrak means like you, dedicated person like you. And why does teacher say this? Because remember, the teacher of the scripture, where does he get his validity from? His words acquire meaning, acquire life, acquire validity, not from his own intellect. No, unlike the physical sciences, where you can inquire into physical sciences and develop your own theories, in Shastram, there is no way of developing own theories. Everything is Shastram only. The words are already conveyed by Shastram. All you can do is to interpret. And therefore, the validity has to come from the Shastram, not from the teacher's intellect. And that is why when you do Namaskara to your Acharya, it does not go to the Acharya. The Acharya is only the container. But it goes to the content. What is the content? Atma alone. And Shankara in his Bhashyam, in his commentary, he gives the definition of Tarkena. So Tarkena is logic generally. So he says Swabuddhaha Abhyuha Matrena. Swabuddhaha Abhyuha Matrena. Abhyuha Matrena means by pure reasoning, Swabuddha, intellectual process. By only intellectual process, pure scientific reasoning, pure logical reasoning. And Matrena means excluding Shastra, excluding the scripture. So Abhyuha Matrena Swabuddha, by pure scientific or logical reasoning, without the assistance of Shastram, of scripture, he says this knowledge can never be attained. And in the context here, Shankara talks about the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophers, also called Tarkika philosophers, because Nyaya Vaisheshika is heavily oriented towards logic. What is the difference between Nyaya Vaisheshika and Vedantics? For us, the Shruti, the scripture is primary. And we use logic as secondary supporting discipline. But for the Nyaya Vaisheshika, logic is primary, and for him, Shastram is only supporting discipline. So diametrically opposite views. And therefore, Shankara says, Swabuddhi Parikalpitam. This Nyaya Vaisheshika philosopher, he is giving priority to his own logic, own intellect. Swabuddhihi Parikalpitam. He thinks that his logic takes precedence. His intellect takes precedence over Shastra. Okay. And that can lead to absolutely absurd results. For example, one of the examples used, let us see, is about gold. Now, gold is a metal, right? So, under which Panchabhuta does it come? If you use your logic, gold will be under which Panchabhuta? Panchabhuta, you know. Prithvi, right? Prithvi. Now, that's very obvious to all of us, because anything coming from the earth has to be Prithvi only, right? But Tarkika's logic is different. He says this gold, it cannot belong to Prithvi. Why? Because Prithvi is dull. Now, which of the Panchabhutas is shining? Fire. Agni shines. And therefore, the Nyaya Vaisheshika argument is that fire shines, Agni shines, and so does gold. And therefore, gold is basically Agni. Logic is great. but conclusion is stupid. Conclusion is absurd. So this is what Shankara says. Giving priority to your own intellect over the Shastram can lead to some fundamentally absurd results. Okay, so that's why in our interpretations, for us, Shastram is always primary. And that is why we give so much importance to Shastric words. Shastram is Shabdam, it is words. And to interpret words, to interpret sentences, we need to know the words. There can be no interpretation of a vakyam, of a sentence, without understanding the individual meaning of the pada, the words. And therefore, pada vakyana, that is the way of interpretation. First you know the words, then you put the words together and see the sentence, and then you interpret. And to know the words itself, you need grammar, proper grammar, because Sanskrit grammar is a bit complicated. And that is why traditionally when you study Vedanta, one of the primary disciplines which you undertake is Sanskrit grammar also. Because we are not doing that, because we are not studying in Sanskrit. We are as far as possible translating everything into English. And occasionally we will give you where there is necessity for an explanation in terms of Sanskrit grammar, that we do. Okay, so this is the mantra number 9. Now we will chant the next mantra. So please unmute yourself. Janamyagam shevadhiritya nityam.
Jnanamyagaham
Shevadhiritya nityam. Nahi dhruvai prapyate hi dhruvam tat.
Nahyadhruvai prapyate dhruvam tat
Tato maya nachiketaschito agnihi.
tato maya nachiketashtohi
Anitya dravyai praptavan asmi nityam.
Anityai praptavanasmi nityam.
Okay. So he says, Aham janami. Right? So that's the first word itself. Janami. Janayam is aham janami. I know what iti shevadihi. So that you have to break up the second word. Shevadihi iti anityam. 3 words are there. Shevadihi iti anityam. That is the breakup of the second word of the mantra. So he says, Aham janami shevadihi iti anityam. He knows. Now, shevadihi is a product. Any karma phalam is basically shevadihi. So, aham janami shevadihi anityam. He says, I know that all karma phalams are impermanent, inityam. Why? Because tad dhruvam. So, nahi dhruvaihi, adhruvai. That breakup has to be the second word. Nahi adhruvaihi prapyate hi tat dhruvam. So that hidhruvai is he plus adhruvai. So nahi adhruvai, by an impermanent sadhana, impermanent means tat dhruvam, that permanent thing, nahi prapyate, cannot be obtained. So this permanent thing is Brahman. Moksha is talking about. He says, I know, and very importantly, the Yamraj is saying, okay, he says, I know that karma phalam is impermanent. Because permanent, that which is permanent, for that is permanent is what? Brahman or moksha. Na prapyate hi adhruvai, cannot be obtained by impermanent sadhana, by impermanent means. He says, I know. He is admitting, I know that moksha can never be obtained by impermanent means. Why? He says, Shevadihi anityam. All karma phalam is impermanent. That is the first sentence. Then interestingly enough, he says, Tat agnihi chitaha. That is Nachiketas ta agnihi. So Tat agnihi chitaha. That yet, after knowing this also, knowing what? After knowing that all karma phalam is impermanent, and therefore karma phalam, moksha cannot be karma phalam, because moksha is permanent. And yet, what did I do? Anitya dhruvehi maya, with impermanent means, asmi prapavan nityam. This nityam has been obtained. This permanent position has been obtained by me through impermanent means. Okay. So what does it mean? On one hand, he is saying that I know that karma phalam is nityam. I know that anityam is impermanent. I know that moksha is permanent. Joining the two sentences, what does it mean? That moksha cannot be obtained through karma, because moksha is not a karma phalam, and all that karma gives you is what? Karma phalam. And if moksha is not a karma phalam, obviously karma cannot give you moksha. He says, I know that. And yet he says, this position of mine is what? As Yamraj. He says, I have obtained through impermanent means. What does impermanent means? It is that fire ritual which he taught Nachiketas, which is hereafter going to be known as Nachiketa Agni. At that point of time, it was just the fire ritual. The name Nachiketas was not there because that is a boon given to Nachiketas, that in future this ritual will be known by your name. So with the help of a finite means, a person cannot gain infinite end. And infinite end is moksha. So with the help of any karma which is finite, moksha cannot be gained. Why? Because in any karma, in any homam, in any ritual, all the components, are they finite or infinite? Materials, time, place, the priest, the yajamana, everything is finite. And therefore, with these finite components, ingredients, that nitya sadhyam, the nitya objective of moksha cannot be obtained. And therefore, Yamaraj is admitting, tatapi, even then. Even then means what? Even when, in spite of the fact that I know that moksha cannot be obtained through karma, what did I do? Agnichita, I did the Nachiketas homam. I performed the homam. And he's saying, regretfully, I did not choose moksha. I performed the homam knowing that there will be the anitya phalam. Impermanent karma phalam will be there. And by performing the rituals with all those finite material ingredients, I have obtained, he calls it nityam, eternal heaven. But we have to understand that it is not really eternal. And that is why he says, anitya dravyaihi, using this in finite materials, using the finite materials, praptavan asmi nityam. I have obtained what is infinite. Okay. Here, we have to very carefully note that what is the karma phalam which he has obtained from that ritual. Yamaraj has obtained something because of the fire ritual. What is the karma phalam?
That he is Yamaraj.
Yes, the position of Yamaraj he has obtained. Okay, so there immediately, this is the pramanam, Shruti Vakyam, which tells you that Lord Yama is not a person, it is a post. Because he has said this nityam result, this post of Yama I have obtained because of this ritual. Now, this Yamraj post, is it permanent or impermanent?
Impermanent.
Why is it impermanent?
After his punya get over, he may have to go to a different loka or a different role, or
More specifically, when will this?
The Mahapralayam.
Mahapralayam again, or
Yes,
just Pralayam.
Mahapralayam. When Brahma Loka gets destroyed in Mahapralayam, that's one complete Srishti will get destroyed. Yama's post will also end, right? So it is not permanent, it is relatively permanent. So this Nityam here has to be understood as relatively long. Why relatively? Compared to the lives of human beings or the life of the Srishti itself, individual cycles of creation, compared to that, this is relatively permanent. And therefore, Yamraj calls it Nityam. Shankara wants to make sure that this position, this idea is clearly understood. So in his commentary, he says Nityam is equal to Apekshikam. Apekshikam means relative. So this eternity, which Yamraj is talking about, this infinite time, infinite post, which Yamaraj is talking about, he says is apekshikam nityam. It is only relatively infinite. It will last only till the Mahapralayam comes. And when the next Srishti begins, a new Brahmaloka will be created where there will be a new Lord Brahma again. And a new Yamaraj also will be there. So that point of time, all the posts will get destroyed. Again, they will be created. And again, there will be different jivas occupying each of these posts. See, what is being said is that all the positions of gods and all that, Yamaraj, then Brahmaji himself, all these positions basically, they are all posts only. And they are all filled up by jivas only, just like us. But jivas who have got a lot of punyam. Because of the punyam, they will have attained these different posts. Okay. Now we will do the 11th mantra. Remember that the teaching has not started as yet, okay? This is all introduction. So, Yamaraj is generally appreciating Nachiketas. And therefore he is generally talking. He has not begun his teaching of the real essence of Vedanta. So now we look at verse number 11. Kamasyaptim jagata pratishtham
कामस्याप्तिं जगतः प्रतिष्ठा
kritoranantyam abhayasya param
क्रतोरनत्यम्
क्रतोरनत्यमभयस्य
अभयस्य पारम्
sthoma mahad urgayam pratishtham
होममहदुर्गाय प्रतिष्ठाम्
स्तोममहदुर्गाय
दृष्ट्वा धृत्या धीरो नचिकेतोऽत्यस्राक्षिः
दृष्ट्वा धृत्या
So it's not as easy as the Bhagavad Gita, right? New words, complicated pronunciations. So look at the last line. He says, and of course, addressing to Nachiketa. So Nachiketa is there in the last line. Hey Nachiketo, the last word, compounded word. Hey Nachiketo. Drishva. Drishtva means having seen, having considered. What have you considered? Urugayam sthoma mahat. So that is in the second line. Urugayam sthoma mahat. That sthoma mahat urugayam has to be broken into Urugayam sthoma mahat. Okay, so this Urugayam means very, very vast. And sthoma means it is glorious. So Urugayam sthoma mahat. This vast and and Pratishtham is established. So Urugayam sthoma mahata pratishtham, established in Hiranyagarbha. So he's saying, having considered everything, including Hiranyagarbha post which I offered you, then what will that post do? Kamasya aptim. The first word, Kamasya aptim, it will fulfill all your desires. Why? Because Jagata Pratishtham. Jagata Pratishtham is support of the universe. So he's referring to Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is the support of the universe, because of whom the universe itself is there. Why is that called so? Why is Hiranyagarbha called the support of the universe? We have to make sure that we understand all this going forward. So, what is the relation of Hiranyagarbha to the universe?
He's the
Samashti Sukma Prapancha.
Anybody?
Brahmaji.
Sukshma Shariram of the universe.
Sukshma Shariram of the universe. Okay. Agreed. Sukshma Shariram of the universe is Samashti Sukshma Shariram. What is his name?
Brahma.
Lord Brahmaji is Hiranyagarbha. Okay. So basically, Hiranyagarbha, the Sukshma Shariram, is the cause for Virat, the Sthula Shariram. Okay. Virat is the physical body of the universe, Sthula Shariram. And the cause for our physical body is what? Our subtle body. Similarly, the cause for the universal physical body is said to be the universal subtle body. And what is the cause for the universal subtle body? It is the universal causal body. So that is the hierarchy. First, there is Antaryami. And from Antaryami, Hiranyagarbha is what? From Hiranyagarbha, Virat is born. So these connections we should remember to be able to understand clearly. And that is why he says Pratishtham Jagat. Of this entire Virat, of the entire physical universe, Hiranyagarbha is the support, is the cause. And he says, Ananyatam Kratoho Param Abhayasya. Ananyatam Kratoho Param Abhayasya. So the Ananyatam Kratoho means the infinite result of meditation. Who is the infinite result of meditation? Hiranyagarbha himself. And Param Abhayasya is the highest state of Abhayam, fearlessness. And Dhiraha. Now, so far has been the description of what? Hiranyagarbha. Because what was the highest temptation that Yamaraj offered? Yamaraj offered to Nachiketas the post of Hiranyagarbha. So all this is the description of Hiranyagarbha. What is it that I offered to you? And what is it that you have discarded that is being mentioned? Hey, Nachiketas, I offered to you Hiranyagarbha himself. That post itself I offered you. And that post is the post of Lord Brahmaji. So every possible karma phalam, every possible desire that you have could have been fulfilled by accepting that post. And he says, Hey Dhiraha, O discriminative Nachiketaha, what did you do? Atyasraksi, you have discarded it. Atyasraksi, you have discarded it very, very firmly. Dhritya. So Dhritya Nachiketaha Atyasraksihi. Very firmly, you have discarded even that post of Hiranyagarbha. So again, this is Nachiketa Stutihi, glorification of Nachiketa. And Yamaraj is saying that he's talking about the sacrifice that Nachiketa has done for Atma Jnana. She has sacrificed the Hiranyagarbha status itself. And why is that important? Because Brahmaji is the very basis for creation. And it is said that anything that is created, Brahmaji can create by sheer willpower alone, by sankalpa alone. And even that power you rejected. And therefore he says, very firmly, you have rejected that post. And what is the advantage of Lord Brahmaji's post? That he has mentioned in the first one or two stanzas. Kamasya aptit. Any desire you want, however high it is, you can fulfill. Kamasya aptit. Any desire can be fulfilled by Lord Brahmaji for himself. Not only that, Jagataha Pratishtham is the source, the support of all creation. And you must understand that Kratoho Anantyam. So again, here is a very important word, Kratoho Anantyam. So Kratuhu here means the ritual, the yaga, the yajna. Anantam means infinite result, infinite phalam. Of what? Kratoho. So Kratoho is a Vedic ritual accompanied by meditation, because we saw in Bhagavad Gita, right, that meditation has, all these rituals have two aspects. One is just the karma, and one is the karma accompanied by meditation, upasana. And we saw that to come to Brahmaji or to come to Brahma Loka, it is not sufficient to do only karma. It has to be accompanied by upasana also. So karma plus upasana is the tool which will take you to Brahma Loka. So that's why he says here, Katoho. Those Vedic rituals which are accompanied by upasana, they have ananta phalam. They have infinite results. Again, very carefully remember, these are relatively infinite. Apekshikam. They are not completely, they are not atyanta infinite. They are not atyanta nityam. Atyanta nityam means completely infinite, which is only moksha. Right? The moment you say atyanta nityam, it means absolutely infinite. Completely infinite. And that is only moksha. So here, when he says infinite, he is saying apekshik nityam, relatively infinite, which means lasting for one full srishti up to Mahapralaya. So he says this position of Brahmaji is the result of such meditation. Of course, he uses the word as infinite result of meditation, but we must remember that Brahmaji's life is 100 years. Okay, the 100 not human years, 100 Deva years. And if you want more details on that, we had a discussion upon it. In which chapter of the Gita? Remember?
The 8th chapter.
8th chapter of the Gita. So if you look up that discussion, we had gone into details of how many years and all that. It's not very relevant, but still we will, to know this in more detail, you can look up that particular chapter. We don't have the time to go into individual. So abhayasya param here means that one. Param is param. Abhayasya param, maximum. Param is infinite. Abhayasya param, that fearlessness is maximum. Right? Now here remember, he is calling Hiranyagarbha as completely fearless. And earlier on, Nachiketa said what? That everybody is afraid of Lord Yama. So here is implying that Hiranyagarbha is not afraid of Lord Yama also. And that is why completely fearless. And Stoma Mahat. That is there in the third line. Stoma Mahat. Mahat means huge, glorious. So this position of Hiranyagarbha is a very glorious position where one enjoys all sort of siddhis, all sort of powers. So these are all in Hiranyagarbha Padam. When you are Lord Brahmaji, every possible power in the universe is there with you. And therefore, Mahat, great. Because of all these great powers, Urgayam means vast extent, because the universe is very vast. And such a pratishtha, such a position in Hiranyagarbha, you refused. So this is all stuti, all glorification of Nachiketas. So again, I'll repeat, we have to remember that whenever we say upasana here in this section, where did it get Lord Yama? It got him to Brahmaloka, right? So Brahmaloka means it has to have been accompanied by upasana. So you can do karma. I mean, this is a very technical point, but I hope you are able to understand. You can do karma without upasana. You can do karma without meditation. But every upasana needs the ritual. There is no such thing as pure upasana. In the Vedic upasana, the ritual is compulsory, right? And karma, remember, is compulsory for grihastha and vanaprastha. So karma has to be done anyway. But if you want to get a higher result, because karma will give you what? Up to Swargaloka. And if you want a higher result, then you have to combine that karma with upasana. So we say karma, upasana, samuchaya. The combination of karma and upasana we are talking about whenever we say about upasana. And what is the karma phalam of this kind of huge upasana? It is Hiranyagarbha only. You become Hiranyagarbha in the next Srishti. Okay, so that also answers the question about how in every Srishti a different Jiva becomes Hiranyagarbha. The Jiva who has done so much of karma and upasana that he is fit for the post of Hiranyagarbha, he takes over as the next Hiranyagarbha in the next Srishti. Okay. Now we go to mantra number 12. So we will chant. Tam durdarsham gudhamanupravishtham.
Tam durdarsham buddhamanupravishtam.
Guhahitam gahvareshtam puranam.
Guhahitam gahvareshtam puranam.
Guhahitam gahvareshtam puranam.
Guhahitam gahvareshtam puranam.
So remember, it is a half ha and a full va. So that very complicated alphabet you see is a ha with a va in the last part of it. So ha, that's why guhvareshtam. Guhvareshtam. Okay. Then Adhyatma Yoga Adigamena Devam.
Adhyatma yoga dhigamena devam.
Adhyatma Yoga Adigamena Devam.
Adhyatma yoga dhigamena devam.
Matva Dhiro Harsa Shokau Jahati.
Matva dhiro harsha shokau jahati.
Okay. So we carry on. So he says Matva. Matva, having known. Okay. Now Matva is in second line. So this is why it is important to be able to connect. Matva is second line. And he says Tam Devam. So Tam is in the first line. Devam is in the second line. So you have to connect them all. Matva Tam Devam. Having known this very effulgent Atma, who is where? Guhya hitam. He is located in the heart. And Anupravishtam Gudham. This particular Devata has become Gudham, has become, having entered the heart, Anupravishtam, having entered the heart, Gudham, it has become hidden. It has, you cannot see it anymore. And therefore, Durdarsham. Durdarsham means which cannot be understood. And Guhvareshtam. Guhvareshtam means is which is resting in misery, all around, surrounded by misery. And Puranam means ancient. Then Adhyatma Yoga Adhigamena. By Adhigamena means by taking the help of, by resorting to Adhyatma Yoga. What happens? Dhiraha, the discriminative person, Harsha Shokau Jahati. So Harsha is happiness, Shoka is sorrow, Jahati is gives up. So he says, by resorting to meditation upon that Hiranyagarbha who is hidden in the heart, what happens? The discriminative person, he gives up sorrow and happiness. So in these two verses, 12 and 13, these two verses 12 and 13 are the opening summary of the teaching. Just like chapter 2 in the Bhagavad Gita was the opening summary of the entire 18 chapters, 17 chapters. Here in these two verses, first Yamaraja is presenting what he is going to present. The entire teaching is being summarized. The opening summary, we call it. So, and what does he do? What is the, in opening summary, what do? You outline the subjects which you are going to cover, right? What are the subjects which are covered in Atma Jnanam? There is Atma Swarupa, the nature of Atma. There is Atma Jnana Swarupa. So not only nature of Atma has to be covered, the nature of Atma Jnanam also has to be covered. And the third one is Atma Jnana Phalam has to be covered. So three things are there: nature of Atma, Atma Swarupa. Nature of Atma Jnanam, Atma Jnana Swarupam. And the benefits of Atma Jnanam, Atma Jnana Phalam. These three are going to be outlined. And therefore it says, Matva Devam, having known. So Deva literally means the shining one, the self-effulgent Atma, the self-evident consciousness principle. And he's saying this Atma is Durdarsham, because of its extreme subtlety. And subtlety here means what? Indriya Agocharam, not available to the five pramanams, not available to the sense organs. Because this Atma is not available for observations through any of my Indriyas, I cannot objectify that Atma. I cannot convert it into a prameyam, into an object of my knowledge. And that is why Durdarsham. It is very difficult to understand. And Guha Hidam. So Guha means, literally means cave. And here in the scripture, when the word cave is used, Guha is used in connection with the Atma, remember that Guha is being used as the heart. So the cave of the heart, literally in English it means cave, Hridaya Guham, cave of the heart. So that is another name for mind. Whenever you hear this word Guha or Hridaya Guham, just remember it is another name for the mind. And therefore in Shastram, the mind is referred to as the cave of the heart. Because according to the scriptures, the mind is located in the heart. Mind, remember, is an indriya, right? Five indriyas we say, but the mind is antakaranam. It's also taken as a sense organ. And just like other indriyas have golakams, the mind also has a golakam. That mind is located in the heart. Golakam of the mind is the heart. Of course, in Jagrata Avastha, in the waking state, the mind functions all over the body. Okay, the function of the mind is available all over the body. But in Sushupti Avastha, the mind, when it withdraws, it needs to go to a particular place when it withdraws, right? That withdrawal happens in the heart. So location of the mind is supposed to be in the heart, and therefore Guha. The word Guha also has another meaning. A cave has darkness inside, right? No light enters the cave. Similarly, within the mind, there is Atma Ajnanam, there is ignorance. And therefore, Guha can be taken as the ignorant mind also. Right? And he says, Gudham Anupravishtham. Anupravishtham. Even though the Atma is available in the mind, Anupravishtham literally means to enter. So even though Atma is available in the Antakaranam, it is Gudham, it is hidden. Why? It's not easily identifiable. So in the mind, the Atma is available as what? As the non-changing consciousness principle. It is that consciousness principle because of which we are aware of every one of our thoughts. That consciousness principle reveals to us every thought. The thoughts are permanent or temporary. They are temporary. They come and go. They are subject to coming and subject to going. And therefore, we say the mind is full of thoughts because each thought comes and goes. And they come, sometimes they come at rapid speed. So mind is constantly changing. And therefore, there must be some changeless principle because of which I know this constantly changing thoughts. That changeless principle is the non-changing consciousness principle. And that brings us to a very important point. When there are two things, one of which is changing and one of which is changeless, which one attracts our attention? The changing one always attracts our attention, because the non-changing one, you have to actually focus to be able to realize that it is there, right? It is like your hand moving through light. If a light is here and hand is moving, you tend to focus on the moving hand, and it requires a conscious effort to know that yes, the light is also there. Similarly, this things are changing is Maya. So Maya is always attractive, and therefore we lose sight of that non-changing awareness, which is the consciousness. Shankaracharya adds saying that these changing thoughts, these variable thoughts, they seemingly hide the Atma, figuratively hide the Atma, meaning that they distract our attention from the Atma. So this distraction alone is called Gudham, hidden over here. So Gudham Anupravishtham. The Atma is hidden because the mind is distracted, because of the continuously variable thoughts which are happening in our mind. And Gahavarishtham, because of this concealment alone. So Gahavarishtham means surrounded by miseries. Gahavaram means suffering. And Stham is resident or stable, surrounded by. So Gahavarishtham means standing there in this pit of suffering. So because of the fact that I am identifying myself with the thoughts alone, all the things are changing, I'm identifying myself, and I am not owning up the Atma. So there are two things, one which changes and one which doesn't change. The changing one is the world, are my thoughts, and I'm able to identify easily with them because I'm distracted by their movement. But this unchanging consciousness, I am unable to focus on because of the changing Anatma. And therefore, what does it mean? The non-changing Anatma has inside it a lot of non-changing Atma has inside it a lot of changing Anatma. Anatma can be taken as problems. So in this non-changing Atma, all the changing problems can be found. And because I'm not able to see this non-changing Atma, I'm able to see only the changing problems. Thus, whenever I close my eyes, I only see the problems. I never inquire into where are the problems situated. Are they in me? Are they in the Atma? Am I the Atma? Am I the Anatma? All these questions are there, but I never get to inquire into them. So Atma is all pervading, but it manifests how? As consciousness in the mind. Remember that moment we use the word consciousness, you are automatically including the reflecting medium, which is the Antakaranam, the mind. The non-changing Atma, when I say Atma is conscious, I'm talking about the consciousness being manifested in the Antakaranam, in the mind. Outside the mind, let us say in the body, or in my hand, or in my bones, how is that consciousness manifested? When I say consciousness, it is Atma. So it is better usage is how is that Atma manifested? So Atma is manifested in the mind as consciousness. Atma is manifested in the bones as what? Existence itself. In the world outside, in the mountains, in the rivers, it is manifested as existence itself. So this Atma is existence consciousness. And Matva, having known that Atma, how should you know the Atma? There is only one Atma Jnana. So he says, Adhyatma Yoga Adhigamena, by following Adhyatma Yoga. What is Adhyatma Yoga? Basically means Jnana Yoga. Adhyatma means myself. Adhyatma Yoga is trying to understand who I am. So basically consciousness, trying to understand that I am the consciousness existence principle. So whenever we say Adhyatma Yoga here, it means Jnana Yoga. And of course, in the next mantra, Lord Yama defines the Adhyatma Yoga also. It consists of Shravanam, Maranam, Nididhyasana. And he says, therefore, hey Dhiraha, the person who has understood this, the discriminative person, the competent student, having understood this, what does he do? Harsha Shaukau Jahati. He goes beyond the pleasures and the pains, beyond the worldly pleasures and the worldly pains. So, very important point being made over here, that life is a series of pleasures and pains which we confront. And they're all in random order. It is not necessarily that pleasure will be followed by pain. So you get unpredictable, uncontrollable series of pleasures and pains. And that is why we say that even avatars cannot avoid them. And therefore, while we cannot avoid them, we should accept them both. Harsha Shaukau Jahati. Accepting both is called transcending both. Harsha Shaukau Jahati. Abandons the concept of reacting to them. So we should accept them both without reaction. This is called transcending them. So enduring without reaction and without the raga dvesha, that is the key to transcending the worldly pleasures and pains. Remember that raga makes me want the pleasure to continue. Because of raga, when I'm attached to something, it makes me happy and I want that pleasure to continue. When there is dvesha, there is pain, I want the pain to stop immediately. And the more I dislike the pain, the more the impact of the pain is. I resist the pain and the effect of the pain is more. Right? Understanding that this pain and pleasure are part of the law of karma and that I alone am responsible for my pain and pleasure. This is the attitude which is the appreciation of Vishwarupa Ishvara. Ishvara Rasada Buddhi. And therefore, this attitude needs to be extended not just towards the karma phalam, but towards janma and maranam also, because they are also karma phalam. If I dislike death, I cannot avoid it. I have to understand that anatma is subject to change. Anatma, it will die. Once something is born, it will die. This understanding is jnana phalam, moksha. So with this, we'll stop. Next class, we'll start with verse number 13. If you have any questions, we can go ahead.
Raviji?
Yes, please.
This might be a bit silly, but I'm confused as to why, like Lord Brahma on Lord Yama clearly have jnanam because they are teaching other jivas.
Yeah.
So why would someone who has jnanam do such intense upasana to achieve something impermanent?
No.
Like this post of.
What he said was that during his tenure as a jiva, he chose to not opt for moksha, but do upasana. As a result of that upasana, he became Lord Yama. During his tenure as Lord Yama, he became a jnani. Same thing with Hiranyagarbha. Not having chosen moksha, he did the karma and the upasana, which gave him that fruit of being Hiranyagarbha. He becomes a jnani during his tenure as Hiranyagarbha, not before that.
I see. But it still sounds baffling that someone can have that discipline and chitta-shuddhi to do that kind of intense upasana to
Yes.
achieve this, but not seek
It's
the
a very,
permanence.
very strong temptation to be the creator of the universe, right? So he must have thought, okay, let me be once. Then, you know, let me see later what happens.
Right.
A huge temptation. That is why he's so appreciative of Nachiketas, who turns down everything.
Right.
Yes, Indiraji Bali.
This how can we turn every action into upasana? Every action, like is it just the Ishvara Samarpana and
It is just Sankalpa. It is the mental resolution that yes, this is being done for you, O Lord.
Okay, so the same Ishvara Arpana,
Arpana Bhavana, same thing.
that
Yes.
will be a upasana, every action.
That is the upasana. Like, you know, Archana is, right? Archana is you offer leaves.
Yes.
Or flower leaves. So every time you say the name of the Lord, you offer one leaf or one flower. It is the same thing. That flower represents your karma. Every karma of yours, you offer to the Lord. The way you offer flowers during upasana or during meditation or karma in the homam itself.
Okay.
Yes, June.
Thank you.
Om Raviji.
Homam.
So when we mentioned that there is no pure upasana by itself, there is nothing like pure upasana.
Yeah.
When we just sit down, close our eyes and meditate, then what are we offering in
No,
that
we are talking about
meditation?
Vaidika karma. Okay. So
Okay.
in Vaidika karma, there are specific karma phalam prescribed for karma and for upasana with karma. So in the Vedas, there is no such thing as pure meditation. You just can't sit and meditate. The only thing that what comes from there is the nididhasanam part, where there is no karma involved because it is knowledge only. But if you are doing a homam, so anything, in fact, if you do Vishnu Sahasranama also, there is a karma part of it and there is a visualization part of it, which is the upasana. So if you have been attending Shivani's classes, there is a dhyanam part. That dhyanam is the visualization. That is the upasana part. The chanting of the Shastranama itself is the karma part. So from the Vaidika point of view, from the Vedic point of view, karma is two pieces. One is karma, pure karma, and one is karma with upasana. Both have different types of fruits.
Thank you. So the other developments of meditation are post-Vedic, like the japa meditation or this other type.
Japa is very much karma. Your body is involved, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
Japa is very much karma.
I think he's asking about the yogic kind of meditations where we sit down quiet and then focus on the breath or some.
Those are all good for chitta shuddhi. They don't have any prescribed. See, wherever there is a phalam prescribed in the Veda, that is what we are talking about. Because the whole discussion is about how Lord Yama became Lord Yama through meditation and karma. So yogic meditation of they also have fruits, like the Yoga Sutra talks about various siddhis, right? But this bifurcation into karma and upasana is not there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so with this we'll stop. Thank you so much. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate Om Shanti Shanti Om Tat Sat Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for your patience.
Acharya.
Thank you.
Om.
Thank you.